Okay, so in performing our passive range of motion on the shoulder, elbow, wrist, and fingers, we'd want to start by entering the room, introducing ourselves, performing hand hygiene, donning our gloves or any other necessary PPE, and identifying what we're going to be doing to the patient so that they are aware. You always want the patient to be informed. Very important. And so moving into the first part, you can position the patient into, if they're lying in bed, lying supine would be just fine, or in the seated position, you complete all of these as well. We can start by innervating the shoulder through its range of motion, and the idea is while you are doing your shoulders, keep everything else still, do not bend, and keep everything in line. So we would start with flexion, and flexion can be done by raising the hands all the way up above the head. You can go to 180 degrees here. If you are not going to innervate the clavicle and scapula and you're trying to keep everything else very, very still, then in that case, you'd go to about a 90 degree. And that is how you can do your flexion without moving other parts and just innervating that shoulder. Then moving on from flexion, you do extension by returning down to center here in midline. Hyperextension can be done by progressing past midline all the way back once again, keeping everything else straight and only using that shoulder. After doing flexion, extension, and hyperextension, you can then move into your internal and external rotations, and that can be seen by internal rotation, external rotation. As you see, no bending of the elbow, fully straight, internal, external. Once again, internal, external. And then you can move into your circumduction, which would simply just be the arm circles. Once again, everything straight and just moving those arms. You can see it on a smaller scale. Then moving from your shoulder down to the elbow, what we'd want to do is flexion, which can be seen by bringing the hand to the shoulder, and extension, back down again. And then there is no hyperextension for the elbow, at least hopefully not. Maybe for some people who are double jointed, that might be the case. And then with that, you'd want to move into your supination and pronation. Once again, supination is like our anatomical positions. You can see the figure always has their palms forward. That would be supination. Pronation is once you bring the dorsal side of the hand to the front and you're rotating that way. So supination, pronation. Then moving from your elbow to your wrist, what you'd want to do is to flex. You're going to bring the hand as far as it can go to the inside of the forearm here. And you'd be bending it just like such, as much as it goes, and that's all mine goes. And then extension is bringing it back midline again, getting everything back in line. Hyperextension can be done by bending this way. You can assist it, you can let them do it on their own, and really you definitely don't want to force any of this. You just, however far it can go back. After doing your flexion, extension, and hyperextension, you then want to move into your radial and ulnar deviation, which essentially, once again, everything in line, radial deviation, ulnar deviation. You don't want anything else moving in this. We'll do it like this so you can see radial deviation, ulnar deviation. I have much more ulnar deviation than I do radial. And it's just a wave. Then moving from your wrist to your fingers, what you'd want to do is your flexion. And flexion is just by creating a fist. Extension is by opening that fist, and once again, everything being midline. And then hyperextension, just like hyperextension with your wrist, except keeping that wrist straight. You'd want to, excuse me, there we go. Hyperextend. Oh, that's still moving the wrist. One finger at a time is a little bit easier to perform. And that would be hyperextending of the phalanges there, of your fingers. And then after doing that, you can perform abduction and adduction of the hands as well. And abduction, adduction. Once you're finished, that would be the range of motion for your shoulder, elbow, wrist, and fingers. You would perform hand hygiene, document appropriately, make sure the patient is in position of comfort, and there is no other needs to fulfill.